Coming up next here on the Metal Command podcast, I review the brand new Vicious Rumors album entitled The Devil's Asylum. I talk about the situation that happened with Cradle of Filth, which resulted in some members departing the band and a lot of drama on social media. I talk about the brand new Helloween single, A Little Is a Little Too Much, and I talk about the response to their brand new album, Giants and Monsters, and I review the brand new Mob Rules album entitled Rise of the Ruler. All of that coming up next here on the Metal Command podcast.
You are listening to the Metal Command podcast.
Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Metal Command podcast. Tony here with you. Of course, really excited to see everybody here today. And if you do want to continue to support the show's grown a lot, and I do appreciate your support. By all means, hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell to be notified anytime I do post any kind of content here on YouTube. And if you are following the show or watching this on any other form of social media or streaming service, please, by all means, give the show a like and a follow there. Okay, so today's show, I have a few reviews for you. I review the brand new Vicious Rumors album entitled The Devil's Asylum. I talk about the response to Helloween's newest album, Giants and Monsters, and I talk about the brand new single, A Little Is a Little Too Much. Of course, there is a video to go with that song as well. They pretty much put that out to help promote the record. Cradle of Filth, or as we can say here, Cradle of Drama. They had a couple members depart the band, and there was a lot of drama involved. And I'm going to talk about that specifically as it pertains to why the way that was handled was bad, and how, if it were me, how I would have handled the situation, and how, as a band and as a musician, you should handle a situation like that. And then, of course, a brand new album by one of my favorite power metal bands that really not many people know about for whatever reason, because they've been great for over 20 years. That would be the band Mob Rules, and they have a brand new album called Rise of the Ruler. So with that said, I'm going to start it off, of course, on a positive note with the new Vicious Rumors titled The Devil's Asylum. So let me just start this off by saying this is an incredible album. 2025, folks, has been a tremendous year for heavy metal. For me personally, the albums that came out this year as a collective group are so much better than last year for me. I think that we've had so many great releases. There have been so many great albums that are basically an album of the year candidate. It's going to be very difficult for me to pick, my top album of the year, or even top 10, or even top 20 or 30 for that matter. Vicious Rumors, of course, is another album. This new album, Devil's Asylum, is another album that's going to make that more difficult. Because number one, this is one of the best albums the band, in my opinion, has ever put out. And it is an album of the year candidate for this show. But the album is absolutely incredible and definitely one of the best the band has ever put out. Now, I've loved the Vicious Rumors for years. They have been definitely one of my favorite power metal bands to come out of the United States. And for the most part, over the course of, close to 20 years, they've been one of the most consistent bands in the scene. Now, many people have always, in my opinion, people have always overlooked Vicious Rumors. And I'm going to give people a little bit of a background on the band in case you've never listened to them. But the band originated in the San Francisco Bay Area, interestingly enough. But I've always thought they've been overlooked because the Bay Area back in the 80s, that is where the big thrash movement started. So you had all these thrash bands, this huge, thriving thrash metal scene, and then you have this power metal band that's also playing there that I think everybody focused so much on, like bands like Metallica and Exodus and all these other great bands from that area, that I've always thought Vicious Rumors as a band has been overlooked as time has gone on. But the band started out on Shrapnel Records. Shrapnel Records, of course, headed by Mike Varney, and it was basically a label that had a lot of, guitar shredders on it, and a lot of stuff like that going on. And it was a great label to really be a part of. And they had their debut album come out in 1985. Now, the 85 album was called Soldiers of the Night. The singer on it, Gary St. Pierre, that was the only album he sang on. Gary St. Pierre actually sang in the band Hawaii, which, ironically enough, is a band formed, one of the first bands that Marty Friedman formed. Many of you know Marty, of course, from Megadeth. But Gary sang in the first album. Jeff Thorpe, of course, the guy that's been in the band in its entirety, the entire time. He's like and I think Larry Howe played on the first album as well. But Jeff Thorpe has been the mainstay in the band, basically the guru behind the band and its existence. And great guy. I've had Jeff on my radio show in the past. Really cool dude to talk to. But Jeff Thorpe, the guitar player, was also playing guitar with Vinnie Moore. A very young Vinnie Moore played on the Soldiers of the Night album. Vinnie Moore left the band, I believe, shortly after the album came out. But the album is really cool. It's very raw. It's definitely more guitar shred oriented. And they really didn't refine their songwriting until they came, and recorded their second album called Digital Dictator. Digital Dictator is considered one of the band's best albums, and it introduced, in my opinion, one of the most forgotten and underrated heavy metal vocalists of all time, Carl Albert. Carl Albert, for me, he's actually one of my favorite singers of all time. And sadly, he had passed away in the early mid 90s. And that's why a lot of people don't talk about him anymore. But Carl Albert is an incredible vocalist. He sang in a band called the Ruffians. I actually have the compilation of a lot of the songs he did with them, along with a band called Villain. But he sang on that album, Digital Dictator, and then sang on the subsequent album after that when the band was signed to a major label. So they had a self-titled album that came out when they were signed, I believe it was to Atlantic Records. And then they had what most people universally, I would say most of the fans would say is their favorite album, and it's an album called Welcome to the Ball, which, of the early era of the band, I would say that's probably, it's really hard. It's between that and Digital Dictator. But this band, this power metal band, had such, it doesn't really get any better. Power metal doesn't get much better than Vicious Rumors from here in the States. It just doesn't. And so those albums, those first four albums are absolutely incredible. They had an album called Word of Mouth, which was the last studio album Carl Albert sang on. They had a live album that was, recorded in Japan as well. And then Carl passed away, and they did a tribute album, which had, a live bootleg show, and had some studio tracks on it as well. So anybody, if you like old school classic power metal, I would check that out because it doesn't get much better than the early era of this band. And still today, these albums sound great, even in modern times. I mean, they've really held up well since then. And then after that, you had three albums that really were kind of a letdown. I mean, they weren't to the quality of the early stuff. They had three records. One of them was called Cyberchrist, which was decent, actually. And they had three albums that were kind of, they released them in the late 90s, and I think one came out in 2000, 2001. I think it was Sadistic Symphony. But those three records, to me, are very forgettable. I was never really a big fan of those albums themselves. And then the band finally found itself again in 2006 with an album called Warball, which featured Hellstar's James Rivera on vocals for that one record. And Warball, I think, is great. It's like a really great return to form. But it's also the start of the band pretty much for the last 20 years being extremely consistent. Because I would say Vicious Rumors, ever since that album came out, they've been one of the most consistent bands out there. You had Electric Punishment, Concussion Protocol, Razorback Killers. I mean, they had some great... They've had some great albums over the last 19 years. And each one of these albums has been incredible. And this one, for me, again, this is one of the best albums this band has ever put out. And, unfortunately, I don't see a lot of people talking about it. I don't know why that is. I've seen a little bit of buzz on social media, but I don't see very many people talking about this record. But I can tell you they have a new vocalist who has the stage name Chalice. And this guy's vocals are incredible. This album has a lot of really great vocal harmonies that this guy does. And when I first listened to this, and I would suggest you guys go check the song out, the song that really caught me, every album I listen to always has like that one track that you're like, man, that song is awesome. Then you just keep listening to it over and over again. And then at least for me, after listening to that same song that I absolutely really catches me, then, after I listen to that song multiple times, then I get into the rest of the album. But the song that really, really hit me pretty hard and I thought was really, really great is called Crack the Sky in Half. And the vocal melodies that Chalice sings on that song and the vocal harmonies on that song, I was blown away by that. And this record, again, if you've liked what the band has put out since 2006, or even if you like the old stuff, I think you're really going to like this album if you have not listened to it. But generally speaking, this is an album of the year for me. Bloodbath is like a classic, kick-ass, really heavy, really fast song. But this guy as a singer is really, really great. And that's the one thing I got to say about Jeff Thorpe is that he has always found great musicians to play with. I like when I listen to any of the albums they've had, a lot of these singers that he's brought in, every one of them has been very, very good. Even the album Cyberchrist, I'm really not a big fan of that record in general, but the singer on the album, that singer was incredible. So he has always brought in quality musicians and has always had really talented guys playing in the band with him. And I got to give him credit for keeping at it, for, these last, 40 plus years. But I really think if I were to take this album and rank it in their discography, it would easily be probably top 3, maybe top 4 of the new era albums. From 2006 on, this is actually my favorite one, and that's hard to say because, man, I love like the album Concussion Protocol, for example. I think is ridiculously awesome. So this record is my favorite out of those, but it's pretty close with the other ones. So I think Vicious Rumors really hit the nail on the head. My favorite songs on the album, and I urge you to check these tracks out. The first song, Bloodbath, I think is incredibly awesome. Crack the Sky in Half, song 3 on this record, is absolutely incredible. There's a song called Abusement Park that I think is very, very good. Boring Day in Hell is a pretty interesting song as well. Actually, that's probably my second favorite song on the record. And then the last song, The Devil's Asylum, is incredible. But the whole album is consistent. There is not a bad song on this record, in my opinion. And I'll be honest, I'm really blown away by this album. This is an album of the year candidate. This is probably one of the best albums. This is easily one of the best albums Vicious Rumors has ever recorded. And I definitely highly recommend it to all of you. Let's get to a different subject. One that many of you have been asking me about. And originally, because it's a band I'm really not into, I kind of held off a little bit on this, but let's talk about the Cradle of Filth situation, which turned pretty ugly on social media. And the reason I'm going to comment on this is that there are a lot of lessons to be learned if you are an artist out there. And this situation ended up getting ridiculous, to be honest with you. To the point where I call it Cradle of Drama. That's my new nickname for that band, Cradle of Drama. So I'm not a big Cradle of Filth fan. I don't really talk about their music, and I have a policy personally that I don't really comment on music by bands that I'm just not into, or if they play a genre or subgenre of heavy metal that I'm not into. But I'm going to comment on the situation. Now, I have no idea how the dynamics of that band work as far as like, I don't know Danny Filth at all. I've never interviewed him on my radio show. I've seen the band live on a couple festivals, and they were actually pretty good live, but the music isn't really my cup of tea, right? So they had a situation where two members of the band, pretty much were going to leave. The name of the members, because I don't know the band that well, you're looking at the guitar player, Marek Ashok Smirda, and then, of course, I believe he's married to, his wife, keyboardist Zoe Marie Fedorov. And I guess they had announced that they were leaving the band. I believe there were replacements that were recruited. I don't know how that whole situation happened behind the scenes, but here's what I do know. These two took to social media to bash Danny Filth, and they went publicly and posted the contract offer that they received from Cradle of Filth. Their management, Danny Filth, whoever made the contract offer. And I went through the contract. So let me explain the contract, and let me explain how most heavy metal bands work out there, or most bands in general these days. If you are a heavy metal band, especially one that's been around a very long time and has been successful, like, say, Cradle of Filth, for example, most of these bands are run and owned by 1, 2, sometimes 3 members who call the shots, who own the trademark, who own the band name and rights and all that other stuff. And essentially, everyone else in the band that's brought in is brought in as like a hired hand, like almost like an employee. So it's like, imagine in a dynamic of a company, let's use Cradle of Filth, for example. Danny Filth would be like the CEO of the company, running the company. It's because music is obviously a business, and he's running the band. Another great example would be Dave Mustaine. Dave Mustaine runs Megadeth, right? He's like numero uno in that band, and everybody he brings in, they are hired help. There are bands with 2 people running the show. There are bands with 3 people running the show, and it varies mostly as far as how the hired help gets paid. Generally speaking, the contract that I was looking at, which I think pays these to like $25,000 a year, looking through the terms of the contract, that is a very typical contract that most people in bands, like if you are like a hired musician, like a hired gun, that is a very typical contract most of these people get. If you go through, and I've seen a lot of contracts personally from musicians that I know in a lot of very significant bands that have a contract pretty similar to this. Now, I also know bands that pay their members a lot more than, what this Cradle of Filth contract has in it. There are bands that are very generous with that, and they pay the hired help, as you want to call them. They pay those people a pretty good amount of money to where like the people running the band really aren't hoarding all the money. Some band members that run things, they take like 80 and 90% of the money, and the other 10% they pay to everybody else. And I'm talking money made like after profit, that profit that's made after expenses are paid. Some bands I know personally pay the other members of the band extremely well, which helps lead to the consistent lineup in those bands. But the contract that I think it was Zoe, or I don't know, one of these 2 former members posted it, is very typical, believe it or not. This is why you see so many people in like 2 or 3 different bands. You might have a $25,000 or $30,000 contract with one band. You might play 40 shows that year, and then you go to the other band you're in, play another 40 shows, and make that $25,000-$30,000 again. And then you're in another project, you're recording. And some of these guys, you take all 3 of those contracts and combine them, you got a pretty decent salary for playing music. But this is how most of these bands operate. I would say 95% of them operate this way. So the contract they posted is very typical. Now, there's a lot of personal mudslinging being thrown at each other. I'm not going to get into any of that because, a lot of that is he said, she said, We don't know what's really true. We don't know what's not true. So I'm not going to comment on any of that. But I am going to comment on how this situation was handled. And I'm going to comment on how it should be handled. And how you as a musician should not handle things in a manner of which these two former members handled the situation. So essentially, the personal mudslinging ended up getting to a point where these two former members, this Ashok guy and Zoe, the keyboard player, went to social media and started publicly bashing Danny Filth. And one of them, of course, scanning and showing the entire contract and making public what they were offered. Folks, I'm going to tell you flat out, that is completely the wrong way to handle that situation. And I'm going to tell you why it hurts these two. It doesn't really hurt Danny Filth that much at all. So, first of all, these two people are obviously not in the band anymore. And they started mudslinging their former boss and even posting things that are pretty private. Now, here's the thing. You don't really see tons of musicians posting these contracts online. You don't really see them complaining nonstop about it. I mean, some people do. Some people might complain and say, hey, I left the band because of money. And that's what happens. But the best way to do that, to handle that situation, instead of going public and flipping out and calling people out and making accusations of misbehavior and unprofessionalism, et cetera, the best way to handle it is to walk away, say nothing, and do not look back. Now, folks, I'm all about people getting paid. I think if somebody owns the rights to a band and they are the reason the band exists and they are taking all of the risks as far as like being like the leader of that band, I think they deserve more money than the hired hands. I'm also all for people getting paid fairly as well. But I'm also about professionalism. I'm also about handling the situation the way you should in a professional manner and to have a good track record and have a good rapport with somebody. I'm going to put myself in the shoes of these two members, for example. So they talked about years of unprofessional behavior. First of all, you put up with that for years, for over a decade. I would have never stood for any of that crap, and I would have been gone very quickly if there was a lot of unprofessional behavior I had to deal with. I just don't put up with that kind of nonsense, number one. So they stayed in the situation. They chose to stay there. They could have went elsewhere. They have a band like Cradle of Filth on their resume. They could have easily left, and they didn't. When there is a contract negotiation, in the case of the contract that they made public. Now, Danny Filth says that was kind of thrown out there, and obviously it was up for negotiation. I don't know how true that is. I don't know if that's true or not. I can't tell you. If the terms of the contract are not what I like, and let's say they are let's say Danny Filth, let's say I'm these two, and Danny Filth is not wanting to negotiate, fine. I have a track record of being in this band. I will look for a gig elsewhere. I would tell them, look, this isn't for me. I don't like these terms. I'm not going to sign on the dotted line. And I'm going to go elsewhere. Thank you for the opportunity. Best of luck. And I would have been gone. The reason, first of all, that's how I do handle things. The second thing is, these two former members, they are easily replaceable. The reason those contracts aren't crazy money, because a lot of people want that gig. And there is more of an abundance of people willing to take that gig than there are gigs available, right? It's a whole supply and demand. There's an overabundance of musicians that would love to be in that band and have that job and play on stage and have that band's name on their resume. And there are far more people out there willing and wanting to do that than there are available gigs in higher profile heavy metal bands that exist. So these two people, Danny Filth, if I'm having people come at me, okay, next man up or next woman up. But these two make themselves look bad, because here's the thing. If I have a band and I see somebody putting my business out there, or let's say, for example, putting out behind the scenes stuff online, posting a contract online and I see them calling out their former boss, I'm going to be very hesitant to trust those people, because how do I know? I don't know what's true or not, but what if they don't like something I do? And then all of a sudden they start calling me out. Maybe they might make something up about me. I don't know. But I'm not going to trust somebody that's going to go take things to the internet and take things to social media. I'm just not going to do that. So it's not like these two won't get a gig somewhere. I'm sure, they're talented musicians. I'm sure they'll end up in a band somewhere. But it's going to be much harder for them to get pretty high profile gigs in a lot of bands. I'm not saying they can't. It's going to be harder because people are going to see them posting this nonsense online. And really what they are doing, and I'm not saying they're wrong in feeling the way that they do, because I didn't experience what they went through in the band. But folks, in a very highly competitive world that we know as the music business, you can't afford to go out and start calling people out publicly, especially when you are in the position of just being a hired hand. Because that one gig you want in another band, you have like 50 other people that are capable of taking that gig and who want that gig. So if I have someone equally as talented as you that doesn't cause drama, am I going to take them, or am I going to take the people that are basically going online and bashing their former boss and showing legal documents online, et cetera, et cetera? I'm probably going to go with the person that keeps things behind the scenes, doesn't call people out, doesn't start bad-mouthing people publicly. I'm going to go for the person who has that attitude over the people whining and crying about everything on the internet. That's just my mentality. So the other thing that it does, and I don't think a lot of you realize the dynamics of social media, especially these two. The more negativity they put out there, you know what it does? First of all, the more people see them posting a document that they probably shouldn't post online, to be honest with you. But it also keeps Cradle of Filth and the band name in the algorithms on social media. And all of that negativity will prop their name in the algorithms on every social media platform in the world. And so when like Cradle of Filth does a tour, when they have a new album coming out, all of this negativity is going to draw people to the band. It will draw people to the band. Even people that may not have even heard the band before, they're going to check the band out. And that is something, them going on social media and doing this is just going to help the visibility on social media for Cradle of Filth. That's what it's going to do. A great example of that, if you remember me talking about Iron Savior, who canceled their appearance at Prog Power, right? Because they don't like Trump. They don't like things going on in the States. Folks, that post had more reactions and responses than anything they've posted on their page ever. At least from what I could see. And I knew more people checking this band out and listening to their music and liking their music as a result of this. Some of them are even people that, might support Trump and other people in the administration here, but they don't care because they just like the music. I can't tell you how many people have told me that. So by complaining about Cradle of Filth, you're drawing people to talk about the band. You're drawing all the metal media to talk about it. I mean, hell, I'm talking about it, and their name is going to get driven up. All you're going to see is their name in the media. And it's the old Gene Simmons adage, right? There is no such thing as bad publicity. Well, that's where we are at here. So these two handled this situation very poorly. You know, a great example of a situation that was handled really well, Primal Fear, with the 3 or 4 members, I think it was 3 or 4 members that left the band. I don't know the details of it. Ralph talked about it on my show. But essentially, they probably had terms of a contract, or, you know, they couldn't come to an agreement on songwriting, and they left. And there was no mudslinging. They weren't happy. They said, look, we're good. You part ways. You move on. No drama. No nonsense. None of that crap at all was going on. Now, there were people in the comments trying to cause drama, but for the most part, you didn't really see anybody in the band or even former members of the band going out and talking smack about anybody, because they kept it professional. These two bozos in Cradle of Filth, Zoe and I keep forgetting this guy's name. What's his name? Marek Smirda. They should have just kept their mouth shut. I don't like the terms of the contract. Sorry, I'm done. I don't like the way things are going on in the band. I'm done. And personally, if they were putting up with unprofessionalism, and I don't know what they deem as unprofessional, aside from the accusations they made, I would have left a long time ago. I would have stopped putting up with that. I would have found a gig elsewhere. I would have said, look, I'm done. Once my contract is up, I'm done. I would have done that far earlier, and I would have not put up with that nonsense if indeed that stuff actually happened. And that's how you should handle the situation. Look, I don't like the way things are going. I don't like the terms of the contract. I'm not going to sign on a dotted line, and I'm going to leave. Because if you hate the unprofessional situation and you keep yourself in the situation, then who's really to blame? Like if someone, they mentioned something about, they were talking about how Danny Filth said things are going to get better and some changes are going to come. Well, look, if the changes don't come and things don't get better and that person hasn't kept their word, why would you want to work for them? I would have been gone in a heartbeat if something like that happened. If somebody broke their promises multiple times, according to these two, I would have been gone in a heartbeat. They chose to stay in that situation, and then suddenly now they want to complain about it. You put yourself in that situation. And I've always had the saying that what you allow will continue. And if it continues, you shouldn't allow yourself to be exposed to it. You should take yourself out, be gone. They could have easily left. They could have had another gig somewhere, but they didn't do that. So, again, I'm not getting into the mudslinging nonsense of this, talking about, all the stuff they were saying about each other, that all the unprofessional behavior these two parties allegedly did to each other. I'm merely speaking about the way it was handled online. I'm merely talking about how it should have been handled. And again, I got much respect for Danny Filth from a success standpoint. I don't know the guy. I've never talked to the guy. He's never been on my show. I don't listen to the band really. But I'm using this as an example of how you as a musician should handle these types of situations. Okay, coming up next after the break, I'm going to talk about the new Helloween single, A Little Is a Little Too Much, and the response to their album, Giants and Monsters. I also ended up getting some really cool vinyl variants of the new album. And I review the new Mob Rules album entitled Rise of the Ruler. I'll be back after this. Tony here from the Metal Command podcast. Since 1998, I have hosted this show, which started off as a radio show and, of course, is now in the world of podcasting. That's right. I've hosted the show since 1998, and I've had the privilege of speaking to so many great bands and artists over the years, and I appreciate the following and support I am receiving from all of you. The show has definitely grown a lot over the last year, and I would love your support. If you have not yet done it, please hit the subscribe button here on YouTube and follow the show on any other form of social media. Now, back to the second half of this episode. Okay, welcome back from the break here on the Metal Command podcast. Tony here with you. Let's talk about Helloween's brand new single, A Little Is a Little Too Much. Many of you have asked me what I think about the video and what do I think about the single. And I've also had many questions asking me about my opinion of the physical product. What do I think about the vinyl variants they put out and the quality of, the pressings, and what do I think of the earbook? And I've had a lot of questions asking me about what I think about the bonus material, and what any other question I ended up getting, which was interesting. I actually had quite a few of these asking me, what do I think about how the album has been received and promoted compared to other Helloween albums? And I thought that was a very interesting question. It was interesting that a lot of you asked me about this. So I'm going to talk about all of that here in this segment of the episode. So let's first talk about the single. As many of you have watched or listened to, I had a video talking about the album. I did a review on the album, a pretty in-depth review as well. That is in the show notes in case you missed it. But in that review, I said A Little Is a Little Too Much would be an excellent single for this album. And great minds must think alike, because that's exactly what they did. And they also have a video to go along with it. The video is kind of funny. It really symbolizes what that song is all about. And I just think that the video made me laugh, actually, watching it, because this band does have a sense of humor. And I thought the video was perfect for this specific song. But again, it's a straight ahead hard rock song in the formula that Andy Darris has used for the last 31 years in this band, and even going back to his days in Pink Cream 69. It's short, it's straight to the point, it's catchy, and the best part about this track is the fact that Andy and Michael are trading off vocal lines in this song. So I think it's a great single. I mean, it really isn't much more to talk about as far as that goes. Many people have said to me, a while back, especially a lot of journalists, they like this song better than This Is Tokyo. That is, even in some of the discussions I've had on other podcasts that I've been a guest on, that's a general consensus from most of the journalists out there. So this track has gone over really well with a lot of people, and I think the song is fantastic. So with that said, now let's get into the earbook and the vinyl pressings that they have put out. So right here, these are the vinyl pressings that I have. I ended up getting the yellow and black splatter vinyl. The picture disc, of course, you always have to get that. And a light blue variant, as well as the ocean blue. That is, I believe, the U.S. exclusive from RPM. There are other variants. Under the Moonlight Blue is exclusive through their store. I do have a copy of that hopefully coming soon, but the whole tariff situation is preventing that from getting shipped to me. That's no fault of the Helloween store. It's just DHL isn't shipping to the U.S. because of that. So hopefully that gets resolved very soon. And then there's a few other variants. You have one that's like an all yellow variant, pretty much. There's like a green and then a purple and yellow, I believe. And there's like a green and white variant. I do not have those, but these are the four that I ended up picking up. And then we have the earbook. which is right here. I want to give a shout out to Reigning Phoenix Music for the high quality of in the materials of which they actually make a lot of this stuff with. I even say that about the live at Budokan. That pressing, the quality of the vinyl and the packaging is awesome. And I think this earbook is great. And even other bands they have with RPM, as well as, Roar, which is a subsidiary of theirs, and of course they got Perception. The quality of the merchandise, the physical merchandise they are putting out is awesome. Just absolutely, I can't speak any more highly of it than I am right now. But the earbook is cool. So inside of it, you got the band photos. Now what's cool is, I'm going to show this to all of you. You have sketches, the pumpkin sketches. My buddy Marco Smira, big shout out to him from South America. I've known him through the internet for like close to 30 years. He's a tremendously talented artist, and he is a huge Helloween fan, and he's very good at like the old school pumpkin sketches, and all of his look great. So you have a lot of that, in here. And as you get further into it, they got this really cool like centerfold type thing going on with the artwork. I mean, it looks really, really cool. And then you have a part of this where the band members get to make their own statement about the album, and then have photos of them. So it's a really, really well done, well put together book. And I think it's really well done. It's got kind of a matte cover. There's no glossiness to it, which I actually like quite a bit. And then, of course, we have the bonus material, which is something you have all asked me about. So you have Out of Control, and in 3 versions, alternate versions of the song Into the Sun. You have a version with just Andy Darris singing. You have a version which just has Michael Kiske singing. And then you have the acoustic version of the song. And then, of course, you have the song Out of Control, written by Marcus Grauskopf. So that was actually not on the regular Jewel Case edition, but Out of Control appears on the Digipack, and it appears on the vinyl pressing of the album. All the vinyl pressings, from what I gather, what I could see. So that song is of course interesting. Now, the other thing is, people asking me, why does Helloween always have lots of bonus tracks? That has been a question sent to me quite a few times, and I've answered this over the years. The way that the band operates is that they kind of go into their own studios and write their material. They get a bunch of songs together, and then they pick a bunch of these songs, and they record them, and then they kind of figure out, okay, which songs fit the best together. So I'll give you an example. Like, you might have Wyke writing 6 or 7 tracks. He might submit them all. The band maybe picks 3 of them, and then maybe they pick 2 that actually go on the record. Something along those lines. And then you have leftover tracks that either A, get used on other albums, because maybe they don't fit this album quite well. And that's typically what happens. So if you look at the band's history, they've always had lots of bonus tracks. Let me give you some examples. Look at Time of the Oath. I think Time of the Oath actually has the most songs they ever put out for one album session. I think it's 20. Now, a few of those are covers. You had the Judas Priest cover, and you had a few covers on there. You had the Status Quo cover with Rain. So they had a lot of covers on those. Master of the Rings, too. They put out 18 studio tracks, and there were some covers on the bonus tracks as well. And you just look at, like, Seven Sinners had 16 songs recorded for it, and I believe 3 of those were bonus tracks. I think Aiming High was used as the bonus track if you bought the iTunes version of the album. Then you had, I think Free was a B-side used for the Are You Metal single, and then you obviously had the Japanese bonus track there as well. I know with Gambling with the Devil, they had a lot of bonus tracks. They had actually one bonus track for each version in each region of the world. So they use those tracks for a variety of purposes. I know on the last album, a lot of people We're disappointed that the song Golden Times was not used on the album. But the bottom line is that they have great bonus material, and in many cases, people are incentivized to buy the better editions or the bigger edition of the album because of the bonus material, because they've always had pretty high quality bonus tracks ever since the band has existed. So as far as these bonus tracks are concerned, they really didn't have a lot, to be honest. You had 3 alternate versions of one song and one other studio track that was written by Marcus Grosskopf. So really quick, Out of Control, that song is pretty much exclusively sung by Kai Hansen. And the song is actually very, very good, but I can understand why they didn't put it on the album, because even though the song is good, it doesn't quite fit in with the flow of these other songs on this record, but it does make a good bonus track. So it's a little different than pretty much anything that's on the record, but definitely a great bonus song, bonus track. And again, that song appears on the Digipack version of the album, all of the versions of the album on vinyl, and of course, this earbook. Now, these 3 alternate versions of Into the Sun are exclusive to the earbook. So, I mean, the ones with just the songs with just Andy singing on it, and then you have the one song with Michael Kiske singing on it. There really is no difference aside from the fact it's just one vocalist singing on the song. I mean, it's the same exact song, except you just have the vocals from one person on it. And then you have the acoustic version, which is really cool. I was looking at the credits. Oliver Hartman plays the acoustic guitar. Oliver Hartman, of course, many of you may remember as the singer for the band At Vance at one point. A very good singer, and obviously he's associated with Avantasia. But overall, I think these alternate versions are pretty cool to listen to. I personally like the one that's on the album better. But this bonus track, Out of Control, is really, really cool. And the earbook is really, really well illustrated. They did a great job at putting it together. The materials it's made out of are high quality. Definitely big props to Raining Phoenix Music for doing a tremendous job on the earbook itself. Now, many of you have asked, how do I feel the album was received in comparison to other Helloween albums? I mean, I could sit here and compare how all of them have been received, over the years. Let me just say this. I think overall, the feelings on this record are I'd say 90% positive. There are people that don't like aspects of it, but I would say this album has received more positive reviews than even the last album that came out, the self-titled album. And again, as I've said, this album flows better. It feels a little better. Again, I discussed that in the review that I did. And even in the interview I did with Andy Darris back in December 2024, he alluded to that. But I think the reception to the album has been very, very good. And definitely more positive than the self-titled release. Now, with that said, I do want to say one thing about this record and the way that it was promoted. In 27 years, now I've followed the band longer than that, but I have had experience in seeing how all of their past albums have been received. I've seen that firsthand. In the late 90s and early to mid 2000s. I have never seen so much press for them in the USA, here in the United States, ever, than I have for this record. I have seen more podcasts with an interview by this band than I think I have ever seen. And they were on podcasts that had very small followings and even podcasts with very large followings. But nevertheless, because there were so many interviews, the strategy in promoting this album was very, very good. Get as many interviews out there as you can. Get as much press out there as you can. And man, I have not seen this band's name. I have not seen Helloween's name in my YouTube feed or social media feed as much as I have for this album cycle. And I think that's a testament to the publicists that, did the promotional work here in the States, in North America. It really is. Now, you obviously had interviews from, people in Europe and South America and everywhere else. But in the United States, and the reason I'm bringing this up, because this has always been the weakest market for this band. I have never seen as much press for this band here in the States, at least as long as I've been around, as I have seen for this album cycle. So I think, personally, they did the best job on this album. The press was, in my opinion, for this album cycle is far better than any other album they have ever done that I've at least been around for. And I could speak to that from experience. So props to the management for getting the right people in place to promote this band here in the States. Like I said, you had some small podcasts with interviews from this band, all the way to people like Chris Jericho, who's a diehard Helloween fan, named his finishing move after the band's first album. Obviously had Michael Kiske on his podcast. But however you want to look at it, I have never seen, not only just here in the States, from podcasts here in the States, but even around the world, I have never seen this band's name in the algorithms, in my feed, as much as I have now. And social media has been around for 20 years now, starting off with MySpace. But man, the promotion for this record is outstanding. And I'll just leave it at that. Now let's get into the next and last topic of this episode. Let's talk about the new Mob Rules album entitled Rise of the Ruler. And of course, we have an earbook. Another high quality piece of merchandise. I know Roar is part of Raining Phoenix Music, but this earbook is phenomenal. And it has an extra disc of bonus tracks. Now, Mob Rules, to me, is probably one of the most overlooked power metal bands to ever come out of Europe. They've been around since the late 90s. I remember getting their debut album on my show way, way back in the day. And I have followed the band ever since. And I ended up doing an interview with Jan Christian Hafbrat. He's the keyboard player in the band. He's been in the band for quite some time now. First time ever interviewing anyone from this band, number one. But we have a lot in common because we both grew up with a lot of loving a lot of the same bands, which we do talk about in that interview, and I will put that interview in the show notes. But this album is awesome, and it's the first time in quite a long time Mob Rules has put out a record. And like I said, I own every album that Mob Rules has ever put out. And I got to be honest, this is one of the better ones. This one's actually very, very good and definitely well worth the wait. The bonus disc is cool. You have Stories from the Verdant Vale is what the bonus disc is called. If you like this band, the bonus disc is definitely worth getting with the earbook. A lot of bonus material on there. Generally speaking, though, the production's great. The songwriting is great. And the concept of the album is very, very good. So one of my favorite songs is called Trial and Trail of Fear. And the concept of the album, I think, is great. And to talk more about the concept of the album and, of course, that song specifically, here is an interview clip with Jan Christian Hafbrat where we talked about that. Check out this clip. I mean, it's really good. You have some videos out for it, obviously. Which came out, which is cool. You have Trail of Fear. So, I think that video is it's a really good song too. Trial and Trail of Fear. Maybe talk a bit about that one.
Yeah, try to train fear. It was a song that came very late on the album. As I said, we had to replace our power ballad because on this point another track was needed, and we wanted to have a more heavy track. In the story, it's the moment when you watch a film, there's a certain moment of despair where everything seems to go down and the heroes lose their face. And this is exactly the point in the story where this song kicks in. So it tells about hard times, struggles you have to go through, where you have to force yourself to push to a certain situation. So the name said, the trial and trail of fear. And this musical feeling is the foundation of this song. So it starts with this somehow melancholic piano start, and then I think it's obvious that Klaus and Sven, who are the main songwriters, are big Judas Priest fans at the moment. So I guess there are some influences from that part. But yeah, we tried to write a song that is more straight at this point. So the album was nearly finished, and we needed some song that has a certain drive. We found where we thought, and so the song came in with this drive, then with this very speedy solo part to bring a fresh nuance of sound in it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a twist of melancholic and heaviness. That was the idea behind.
Yeah, the title "Rise of the Ruler."
Yeah.
You know, what was it about this record? Why did you pick that as the title?
The ruler is our band mascot. So when you remember Savage Land or Temple of Two Suns, there's always this guy on the cover with this strange mask. And like every band in the 90s, we also had our band mascot, and it was the ruler. So it was this person, and all the stories were written around this guy. It's in the story.
Guy,
it's
the guy on the big throne, right? That's okay.
Yeah, that's the ruler. He's ruling, and the story is shortly tell about in a dystopian world where everything went down and just a few people survived. There's a group of survivors who want to find a new home, and there's this guy, the ruler, a very ambivalent person. So on the one hand, he's a good guy who leads them out of this wasteland into a green valley. But on the other hand, he's a ruler. He's a guy who has power and has his own obstacles and his own goals. So it's not quite clear if he's a good or evil one. And that's the person. In the first album, they wander through Savage Land. In the second album, they reach the Green Valley and build up a new society. And he is now the ruler. You can see him sitting on the temple and obeying some stars and thinking about some higher forces that will come down. So that's the story. In our new album, I want to some spoilers. The story is also settled 30 years after the events, so as our band evolved. And the main idea was what happens if this person who has this balance and he's good, he's evil, now really turns evil. And this is what you see in the videos. It's said that the ruler over the years somehow fall into insanity on his evil side to command. And so he does some cool decisions. And there's a young temple guard, Dendaya is his name, who rebels against this ruler and said, okay, it's enough now. But the rebellion failed, so he and the group are forced to leave the Green Valley and are back to Savage Land because we wanted to set the story in the Savage Land.
Yeah.
And during this event, the ruler dies out of his insanity. So our band mascot died. And then the story shows that this guy, Dendaya, who's a good guy, somehow turns into the new ruler. So in the end of the album, there's a new ruler, a new cycle repeats, and this good guy also gets some evil twists in the story. And so we tell the story of the rise of a new ruler. And that's the main thing. But if you think about our band, it's the same for us. We repeat our circle, and we, as Mob Rules, with our band mascots, we try to rise above our old obstacles and a new ruler, a new band. We're not the same band that we've been 30 years before. And this is somehow the meta layer of the story. So we as a band, we rise again, and the new ruler is rising, and that's all behind. we get a lot of more information in the yearbook. So I've written a lot of information about this.
Well, that's good. I'll be able to read it. I think the ruler needs to, raise the popularity of European power metal in the States.
I hope so.
Okay, there's Jan Christian Halfbrat talking about the concept of the album and my favorite song off of this album, Trial and Trail of Fear. There are definitely a lot of great tracks on here. The second disc, of course, has some really cool stuff on it. Savage Land reprise. But songs like Trial and Trail of Fear, Back to Savage Land, Future Loom, these are probably, you don't get much better than that when it comes to European power metal. And I think they did a great job with this album. It's definitely more in a traditional, like a combination of traditional metal and power metal. And again, give a shout out to Roar, RPM. The really awesome illustrations in this book are very, very good. Really, really cool stuff. So I think this album is very good as far as power metal albums are concerned. And again, I said this in the beginning of the actual episode here. It is so difficult to pick my favorite albums right now from this year. This year has been absolutely phenomenal. With Mob Rules, I'm going to be honest, this is definitely one of their best albums. It could be their best album, in my opinion. Just everything about it is perfect. The songs are well written. The production is great. Everybody is on point as far as their performance on the album. It's definitely another album of the year candidate for me, folks. So picking the end of the year albums, my favorite albums, and ranking them is going to be very, very difficult. Probably more difficult than any year of this show where I've had to pick that. And Mob Rules just made that a lot harder. So with that being said, that's what I think of the album. Definitely check it out. I'll have a link in the show notes to the interview with Jan Christian Halfbrat. And I definitely want to tell all of you to check this record out. If you like power metal, if you like traditional metal, definitely highly recommended from yours truly. So with that said, that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching the Metal Command podcast, and thanks for supporting the show. Stay metal. Hey, it's Tony here from the Metal Command Show. I want to thank you for watching this portion of the program. Since 1998, I have hosted the show, which started off as a radio program and is now into the podcast format. So I want to thank you for watching and or listening. And if you want to support the program, hit the subscribe button, hit that little bell to be notified anytime I do post any content. A lot of you have been supporting the show and really, really helping this show grow, and I cannot do it without all of you. So with that said, thanks for watching. Stay metal.